In the early 2000s, NASCAR was the fastest growing sport in America, being one of the biggest sports in the country amongst the NBA, NFL, and MLB, with NASCAR capturing just under 20 million viewers for the 2006 Daytona 500, being barely under 2 decades ago. Races routinely sat over 100,000 fans, and even had some featuring waiting lists just to have a chance at buying a ticket for the event. I mean, look at Richmond, a 3/4 of a mile track covered in grandstands, featuring a sold-out race. That's insane in today's day and age. But what assisted bringing fans in droves for NASCAR's rise was a car that let you pass before 30 laps into a run. Take notes, next gen. Mixed with an inability for the average American to go anywhere in the 2000s without seeing some type of driver sponsor promotion or reference, you have some of the components of what was NASCAR's peak. So let's take a look back on the years they spent as a juggernaut in the sports world compared to the step back they have taken in today's age, starting with the year just before NASCAR is set to be taken mainstream across America. But before we go over the 2000s of NASCAR, let me introduce you to the sponsor of today's video. Coofandy is a top-of-the-line men's clothing brand with options in virtually any type of men's clothes you can be in the market for, no matter the age. They also are a sponsor for Joe Gibbs racing driver Christopher Bell in the Cup Series, and will be featured on his car as a primary sponsor for the upcoming playoff Martinsville race in a few months. Coofandy features hoodies, pants, polos, t-shirts, and much more, including some cool NASCAR apparel, while me personally, I'm wearing a black t-shirt off the Bell portion of the website, which feels soft and breathable when I wear it, and also looks good on me, in my humble opinion. However, there are many other options at clothes to choose from, including a cool line of JGR merch that I should have gotten, which I do plan on buying in the near future. If you'd like to purchase some of their clothing items, head to Coofandy.com, and again, thank you for sponsoring this video. Just prior to the 2000 season in late 1999, NASCAR announced a massive multi-million-dollar TV media deal that would change the entire landscape and future of the sport. As until then, it was the track's job to secure a network deal to broadcast the race, and with a schedule that rotated over 20 tracks throughout a given season, it led to the occasion of NASCAR races being on the same channel for back-to-back weeks, coming few and far between, making it harder for a new fan to watch the races consistently, with it constantly changing from one channel to another. However, this all changed once NASCAR signed a $2.4 billion TV deal for 2001 with Fox, NBC, and TNT to put 70% of the races on network TV and limit them to just 3 networks across 9 months of racing. This changed the TV landscape for their fan base and helped the sport rise, but that wasn't starting until 2001. So what about 2000? Well, NASCAR was in the beginning stages of what was about to become the biggest youth movement in its sport's history, taking place over the course of the next few years, with each rookie class producing stars and Hall of Fame drivers for years to come, and 2000 was no different. Featuring 2-star rookies bursting onto the scene in Matt Kenseth and Dale Earnhardt Jr., with each winning both of their first career races in the first half of 2000, seeing son of legend Dale Earnhardt, Dale Jr. winning in the 5th race of the season at Texas, while Roush Racing's Matt Kenseth captured his first win at the longest race in NASCAR, the Coca-Cola 600, eventually going on to best Dale Jr. for the Rookie of the Year honors, with a more consistent season at the end of the campaign. Dale Jarrett defended his Cup championship from the year prior, winning the Budweiser Shootout to start the year, finishing second in his duel, and capping it off by leading 89 laps and winning his 3rd Daytona 500 in the past 8 years, in one of the most dominant speed weeks in NASCAR history. Last year's standout Tony Stewart broke out for 6 wins in the series during this season, just 2 years removed from running open wheel full-time in IndyCar, while his teammate at Joe Gibbs Racing Bobby Labonte joined him in having speed, with Labonte going on to dominate the entire season atop the point standings, spending 31 of the season's 34 races on top of the standings, going on to earn his first Cup Series title by nearly 300 points over Dale Earnhardt, or well over an entire race in points. Earnhardt himself would collect his 76th and final NASCAR win in the late stages of 2000, slicing through the pack at Talladega late in the event to drive from nearly 20th to the lead in under 5 laps, putting him in victory lane for one final time. At this point in NASCAR, safety was still a major problem, yet they had done little to address it over the years, and in 2000 they would suffer the consequences, seeing a death in each of the 3 national series in NASCAR over the course of the season. Adam Petty would lose his life during a practice session crash in the Busch Series at New Hampshire on May 12th at just 19 years old, with the cause of death being a basilar skull fracture. Next, Kenny Irwin Jr. lost his life at the same track just 3 months later on July 7th during a cup practice due to the same injury at 30 years old. And lastly, Tony Roper would succumb to a neck injury following a crash in the Truck Series at Texas on October 14th at 35. However, NASCAR continued to do little to nothing in regards to making their drivers safer on the track.
43rd annual Daytona 500 is set to get underway. Terry Bradshaw waves the green flag. We're racing.
This is the year it felt like they had entered the new millennium, and it felt like the sport was due for massive change. A returning manufacturer in Dodge would re-enter the sport, and along with this brought on Evernham Motorsports to be the flagship race team, featuring 2 shiny red cars and a cup legend for a driver with Bill Elliott, who after signing on with the team returned to victory lane for the first time since 1994, a time frame that spanned for 226 races, ending late in 2001 at Homestead. The owner of this team was none other than Ray Evernham himself, who would leave Jeff Gordon and Hendrick Motorsports after 9 of the most successful years any crew chief could ask for, racking up over 50 wins, 3 championships, and having one of his cars be so good it now sits in a museum. Kurt Busch moved from the Truck Series all the way to full-time in Cup for 2001, continuing with the rise of young talent in the series, taking over in the struggling 97 at Roush Racing late in 2000, formerly driven by Chad Little. Yet he himself also found little to no success in the ride during 2001, failing to crack the top 20 in points all season long, while even DNQing for the fall Atlanta race, leaving the rookie driver 27th in the standings at the end of the year. Another new full-time entry in the series would be the Dale Earnhardt Incorporated 15 car, piloted by Michael Waltrip, who was personally picked by Earnhardt himself to drive the car, despite not winning a race over the course of 462 Cup starts. His first race driving for the team was set to be the 2001 Daytona 500, the same race where Fox finally began their broadcasting deal, that's still going on to this day, for better or worse. For worse. The racing would be thrilling and intense over the 200-lap race, with a huge turnout on TV, seeing over 17 million viewers, as well as a feel-good winner in Michael Waltrip, who promptly broke his 0 for 462 in his first race with DEI. Yet tragedy would strike in Turn 4 at Daytona, and one of NASCAR's biggest drivers in its history, Dale Earnhardt, would lose his life, once again to a basilar skull fracture. His death shook the sports world. However, what happened next in his honor was nothing short of remarkable. The series came back the next week for the second race of 2001 at Rockingham Speedway, with the grandstands filled from turn to turn with fans supporting Dale Earnhardt. And on that day, a Dale Earnhardt Incorporated driver in Steve Park remarkably held off the hard-charging defending champion Bobby Labonte for his second and final career Cup Series win. The story once again continued on in Atlanta during the 4th race of the season, when in a mirrored photo finish nearly identical to the year prior, Kevin Harvick, who is tasked to replace Dale Earnhardt by Richard Childress, managed to hold off one of the all-time best in NASCAR and Dale's rival, 3-time champion Jeff Gordon, to win in a photo finish at the line in just his 3rd career Cup Series start.
Here they come! Gordon got loose, it's Harvick! Harvick!
The last part of the story wouldn't unfold until NASCAR returned back to Daytona in July, and it was nothing short of iconic. Seeing Dale Jr. conquer the track that took his father's life just months earlier in a 1-2 finish for his own race team, in front of a sold-out crowd of screaming fans, all rooting for Dale Jr.
Second, but it's going to be Dale Earnhardt Jr. using lessons learned from his father to go from 6th to 1st and score the victory in the Pepsi 400.
That's unbelievable.
Yes!
That man behind you did it for
Yes!
you. You guys celebrate. Love you, man. You did it.
That was beautiful. Very, very nice.
The finish seemed to heal the NASCAR world just a little bit, with the 2001 title fight wrapping up fairly quickly in the season. As in his first year without Ray Evernham on top of the pit box, Jeff Gordon and new crew chief Robbie Loomis took control of the championship lead following the 13th race of the season, and they wouldn't let go, going on to win his 4th NASCAR title nearly 2 full races before the conclusion of the season. Yet for 2002, the battle ended up being much more close, coming down to the final races of the season with a variety of different talent and experience in the sport. 2002 kicked off with a wild Daytona 500, featuring huge wrecks that wiped out most of the field. Sterling Marlin giving up his chance to win the race for the third time by jumping out of his car to try and fix his damage under the red flag, and wrapping it up with Ward Burton going on to capitalize on Marlin's mistake to bring home an underdog Daytona 500 winner. In response to Dale's passing in the race the year prior, NASCAR immediately began taking steps towards safety. And one of the sport's first attempts at making the racing safer would be implemented at the Brickyard 400, with foam safer barriers being added around the corners, an invention that you now see required at every NASCAR track today. First being tested out by driver Kurt Busch, who was junked by Jimmy Spencer in response to a move made earlier in the year at Bristol to move veteran Spencer out of the way for his first career win. NASCAR's youth movement continued in full effect in 2002, with one of the best Rookie of the Year battles in its sports history, featuring Ryan Newman in the Penske No. 12 Ford and Jimmy Johnson driving in the Hendrick No. 48 Chevy, each who had one Busch career win up to this point. The rookies took to the Cup scene and immediately thrived in one of the most talented eras of NASCAR, with both running some of the most consistent rookie seasons NASCAR has ever seen, with Ryan Newman capturing 6 poles, 1 win, 14 top 5s and 22 top 10s, while also managing to finish 6th in the standings in his first full-time Cup season. On the other side of this, Jimmy Johnson would earn 4 poles, 3 wins, 6 top 5s, and 21 top 10s, while also finishing 5th in the standings. Yet it would be Ryan Newman who took home Rookie of the Year honors at the end of the season, based on NASCAR's weird way of crowning Rookie of the Year winners at the time. Another standout rookie happened to be Jamie McMurray, who remarkably won in just his second ever Winston Cup start, leading 96 laps at the home of NASCAR in Charlotte, subbing in for an injured driver in the middle of his bid for his first ever championship.
He'll do it! 26-year-old Jamie McMurray pulls off the victory in just his second NASCAR Winston Cup start. Unbelievable!
Sterling Marlin dominated the first 3 quarters of the 2002 season, only being outside of the points lead for 1 race. However, lackluster finishes late in the summer of 27th at the Brickyard 400 and 38th at Watkins Glen left his points lead in jeopardy, and after suffering a lap 8 crash at Richmond leaving him dead last in the race, any cushion he had created for himself was erased, which he would end up needing after his 21st place run at New Hampshire. Late season hard chargers of Mark Martin, rookie Jimmy Johnson, and Tony Stewart inched closer as the season wore on, with Martin taking the points lead, marking the first change atop the standings in well over 20 races. Martin went on to hold the lead for just 1 race, suffering a blown engine late in the event at Kansas to kick him out of the points lead. However, the biggest story of the weekend came from the man who dominated the championship all year, as on lap 148 of the race, Sterling Marlin suffered a season-ending injury, making him unable to compete for his first title, a chance he'd never have in NASCAR again. Standout rookie Jimmy Johnson quietly snuck away with the points lead in all this, with just 8 races remaining in the season, making him the first rookie in history to ever lead the points, yet just like Martin it ended up being a short-lived experience, as after the 2 qualified on the front row at Talladega, Martin suffered a freak mechanical issue during the pace laps, which locked up his steering wheel and shot him down into the 48 of Johnson, damaging both cars before they would even take the green flag. However, to make matters worse for each of them, the race at Talladega of all places would end up going caution-free, giving the teams no opportunity to fix the damage without losing an extended amount of time under green flag. Jimmy Johnson would wind up blowing an engine during the race, in one of the worst days for Hendrick engines in their history, seeing numerous issues across the engines they produced for the race. Martin concluded the day in 30th place, the best he could salvage with the circumstances given, allowing Tony Stewart to leapfrog from 3rd to 1st in the standings, a position he'd hold on to for the remainder of the year, eventually going on to pick up his first ever NASCAR championship, just a few years removed from running open wheel full time. This season eventually ended up standing, as what would end up becoming the sport's final organic full season championship battle, as the sport would be thrust into a new era following one man's consistency in 2003. longtime sponsor Winston announced they would no longer be the title sponsor of the Cup Series following 2003, with the brand being forced out the door thanks to nationwide tobacco laws in the late 90s. Michael Waltrip started the year off with his second ever Daytona 500 and a rain-shortened win, while on the flip side, Ryan Newman tumbled through the tri-oval in a violent crash, setting the stage for a season that featured the highest of highs and the lowest of lows a driver can go through. Going on to win 8 times, as well as earning 11 poles, yet suffering hard crash after hard crash, as well as many part failures throughout the year. Elliott Sadler ended up suffering the same fate as Ryan Newman in that year's Daytona 500 during a similar looking blowover style crash at Talladega months later in the fall. However, the worst of the crashes in 2003 is a more forgotten one, as during a practice session at Richmond while leading the charts, the 01 of Jerry Nadeau went through a hard, career-ending crash in turn 1. He'd need to be cut from his car and airlifted to a hospital, where he was left in critical condition due to the extent of the crash, being given just a 6% chance of surviving his brutal injuries, which left him paralyzed on the left side of his body. His injuries included a skull fracture, concussion, a collapsed lung, and several broken ribs. However, after a long process, he continues to recover today. Dale Jr. extended his impressive Talladega win streak to 4 in the spring of the season, winning after making a controversial move below the yellow to pass for the win. However, in the fall race, it was teammate Michael Waltrip who'd pull into victory lane. Darlington played host to what became the closest finish in NASCAR history on March 16th, with fans seeing Ricky Craven best Kurt Busch by 2 1/1000ths of a second in what ended up being Craven's second and final career win, as well as the last time a Pontiac won a NASCAR race, as at the conclusion of this season they'd exit the sport and never return. Along with Craven, a slew of other drivers chose to make 2003 their final year with a NASCAR win, including Terry Labonte at the same track in the fall, Robbie Gordon at Watkins Glen, Michael Waltrip at Talladega, Bill Elliott at Richmond, and Bobby Labonte at Homestead, meaning 16% of the races in 2003 were won by drivers earning their final career win. On the other side of that, the youth movement continued to take over the sport in full force, with 20 of the 36 races being won by drivers who began competing in the year 2000 or after, having one of their own in Matt Kenseth take home championship honors at the end of 2003, taking control of the standings after his first and only win of the season during the 3rd race at Las Vegas, and going on to be out in front of the points for the next 33 races, despite just having one single win. On the other side of the board, you had a driver like Ryan Newman, who despite having 8 wins, was left sitting down in 6th place in the standings, something NASCAR did not take well. And at this point, newly hired CEO and a new title sponsor stepped in for 2004 to change everything NASCAR fans had known as to how to crown a champion.
The 46th Daytona 500 is green.
Nextel took over as the first new title sponsor for NASCAR's premier series in over 30 years, while new CEO of the sport Brian France also marked the first change in who was overseeing NASCAR in 28 years, immediately bringing forth a new way to try and make the end of the season more exciting in what was called the Chase format. The new format took the top 10 in points after the 26th race of the season, or anyone outside of the top 10 within 400 points of the points leader, and reset them for the final 10 races at a significantly lower points deficit than they had prior, with the goal of helping NASCAR compete or take over the NFL in viewership during its regular season with a playoff format. To start the season, Dale Jr. earned a very popular Daytona 500 win, besting Tony Stewart in a battle that came down to under 5 cars at the end of the race due to a large crash in the first half of the event that sent teammate Michael Waltrip flipping through the grass. The Daytona 500 win for Dale Jr. was just a start, as he would go on to have his best season of his entire career, posting a career high in wins and points finish while also being a championship threat for the entirety of the year. Fans were forced to say goodbye to one of the most unique and oldest tracks on the calendar in Rockingham, as with NASCAR's continuing explosion in America, the date was instead given to a second Texas Motor Speedway race, due to its 150,000-seat grandstand that had continued to sell out year after year since being built in the 90s. Nevertheless, Rockingham went out with a bang.
Here they come. Kane comes to the bottom. Kane comes to the bottom. He gets a run. He's got a good run on him. Side by side of the line. Kenseth.
you'd be a Moco finish.
Matt Kenseth wins the Subway 400.
That was a great, but you know, that was really smart on Kane's part. He saved his best for the last lap, the last turn.
Speaking of Kasey Kahne, he was yet another subject of the late 2000s NASCAR youth movement, immediately jumping into the Cup Series after finding little success in the lower series of NASCAR and immediately breaking out, finishing second in his second ever race and backing it up with another runner-up the following week, then second in another photo finish 2 weeks later in Texas, showing he can adapt insanely quickly to the top echelon of NASCAR. He'd earn a few more runner-ups through the remainder of 2004, however he'd also suffer multiple devastating crashes while nearing his first career win, happening at Dover and Charlotte. Despite his impressive speed in his rookie year, Kahne still failed to make the inaugural chase, losing out to his more experienced teammate Jeremy Mayfield, who made his way in using a walk-off win at Richmond to vault him into the top 10 in points, while the 9 struggled all night, dropping 3 positions down in the standings to 12th when things were all said and done. Ryan Newman just barely made it in as a final driver into the chase over Jamie McMurray by 11 points, or just 2 positions on the track, setting the first ever chase grid as Jeff Gordon, Jimmy Johnson, Dale Jr., Tony Stewart, Matt Kenseth, Elliott Sadler, Kurt Busch, Mark Martin, Jeremy Mayfield, and Ryan Newman. The first iteration of the chase in 2004 would ultimately go down as one of the most exciting ones, getting things started off with Kurt Busch jumping out to an early lead on the field through the first 6 races. He'd accomplished this by finishing in the top 6 in every one of the races he ran. However, Busch's consistent ways gave out at Atlanta with 4 races remaining, when on only lap 51 Kurt Busch's engine gave way and exploded, leaving him down in 42nd place, yet the 2 drivers who were within a race of him in the standings failed to capitalize on this. Seeing Dale Jr. turn himself late in the race running in the top 5 off the bumper of rookie Carl Edwards, and Jeff Gordon finished 26 laps down behind him in 34th after suffering a transmission issue leaving pit road. The field slowly creeped back to Kurt Busch over the next 2 races, to give 5 drivers a mathematical chance at winning the title going into the finale at Homestead, exactly what NASCAR wanted when they created this format. The race ended up being a nail-biter all the way to the end of it, seeing Busch's right front tire falling off onto the speedway while he was coming to pit road for an issue early in the stages, granting him a caution that allowed him to stay on the lead lap and spare his championship run. He'd spend the rest of his race clawing his way to the front for points, until eventually retaking the championship lead late and holding on for his first and only title of his career by just 8 points over Jimmy Johnson.
Words in motorsports. From the action-adventure film Sahara, opening April 8th in theaters everywhere, actor Matthew McConaughey.
All right, all right, all right. Gentlemen, start your engine!
W Command. A few hours after that, some of the sport's best went toe-to-toe for a Daytona 500 crown, perfectly encapsulating what NASCAR was like in this time.
At the line, Stewart by half a car length. 4 laps to go.
Man, you can get up there even with that other guy, but you just can't get to pass me. Or can you? Yes, he made it.
Go to the bottom now. He'll slam the door.
He made it.
And this crowd is on their feet going wild.
What a pass. Way to go, Junebug.
3 wide from 11th on back.
Now what are you going to do, Tony?
Windshield. He slams the door on Gordon. 24. 3 to go.
That's what you do when you're in the lead. You just move around, move around.
Look at Kurt Busch in the 97th. 3 wide. He's going to make the pass.
He gets by Stewart.
And here comes Gordon.
Mark Martin back at 7th, still part of the chase here.
Gordon still thinks he can make that outside car in the wall off the 2. I think it's the 9 car.
But he keeps going.
Agree all over the place.
Yep. Jeff Gordon's going to win his 3rd Daytona 500. Kurt Busch, Dale Jr., and Scott Briggs completes a dream week with a 4th place finish.
NASCAR fans would end up having to say goodbye to longtime driver and fan favorite Rusty Wallace at the conclusion of the 2005 season, following 55 wins and over 700 starts in his career, while once again the youth rise in NASCAR dropped off new drivers, including 19-year-old Kyle Busch to replace the retired Terry Labonte at Hendrick Motorsports in the 5, as well as the now full-time Carl Edwards, who had made his mark on the series last year by replacing Jeff Burton at Roush late in the season in the 99 due to lack of sponsorship. Burton would take his talents over to the 31 at Richard Childress Racing, while Robbie Gordon would go start his own Cup team, choosing the rare route of being an owner and a driver, and it would not fare well for him at all. Edwards immediately took his now full-time ride in the 99 and beat Jimmy Johnson at a photo finish in Atlanta during the 4th race of the 2005 season for his first career win, and it wouldn't stop there for the young driver, as the rookie bursted onto the scene with 3 more wins throughout the season. Along with this, 2 other drivers collected their first career wins on the year, with Casey Kane finally defeating his bad luck to win at Richmond in the spring, as well as Kyle Busch dominating at Fontana late in the season to make himself the youngest Cup winner in NASCAR history, being just 20 years old. Jimmy Johnson continued to make his mark on the sport in 2005, this time by earning his 3rd Coca-Cola 600 win in a row, seeing the young driver run down veteran Bobby Labonte and pass him on the outside lane, robbing Labonte of his first win in well over a year. This season, however, belonged to Roush Fenway to dominate, winning 15 of the 36 races throughout the year, while also sending all 5 of their drivers to the chase, taking up 50% of the field, which in an era as competitive as this one is a mind-boggling thing to do for one team. One driver who didn't make the chase due to the Roush stranglehold on it was this year's Daytona 500 champion Jeff Gordon, who despite winning 3 of the season's first 9 races, and even sitting 2nd in the standings after race 10 at Darlington, was left out of the chase. This collapse was caused by a disastrous final 16 races, which saw the Hendrick 24 finish outside of the top 25 in 7 of those races, including 3 straight races with a crash, completely uncharacteristic of them, dropping as low as 17th in the standings during the season at one point, yet rebounding for 11th when it was all said and done. Tony Stewart, who was the most consistent and dominant driver throughout the regular season, went on to carry this throughout the chase, allowing him to secure the championship, leading the points in all but 1 race throughout the final 10 races, and holding off the Roush teammates of Greg Biffle and rookie Carl Edwards by 35 points for the title, marking his 2nd championship in the past 4 seasons and solidifying him as one of the sport's best. Although Roush sent 5 cars to the chase, none of them would be able to hoist the Cup at season's end, and to make matters worse, the night before the 2nd to last race of the season, previous year's champion and driver of the 97 Kurt Busch was detained for reckless driving by the police, eventually leading to him getting suspended for the final 2 races of the season, leaving a bitter end to his time at Roush, as he was set to join a long list of drivers on new teams for 2006. Multiple big teams would undergo driver changes during the offseason for the 2006 season, with some of these including Joe Gibbs Racing bringing on Denny Hamlin to run full-time in the FedEx 11, after standing out in his races the prior year following him replacing Jason Leffler in the underperforming ride. Also on that team, JJ Yeley was promoted from the Busch Series after posting lackluster stats to take over for Bobby Labonte, with Labonte's corresponding move being him joining Richard Petty Motorsports in the flagship 43 for them. Roush Fenway replaced Kurt Busch by poaching Jamie McMurray out of his Chip Ganassi Racing contract to drive the 26 car, while Busch slotted over to the Penske 2 car replacing the retiring Rusty Wallace. Joining Rusty in the retirement department, Mark Martin was also set to give up full-time racing for a backseat role as a part-time driver, choosing to run in 2006 as a salute to his fans after Roush persuaded him into driving the 6 for an extra year so he could continue to develop a suitable prospect to replace him. Along with Denny Hamlin and JJ Yeley, 2 other Busch Series drivers would graduate to full-time Cup Series racing, including defending back-to-back champion Martin Truex Jr. at DEI in the 1 car, and Richard Childress' Clint Bowyer driving the 07. Lastly, Michael Waltrip chose to depart from his longtime home at Dale Earnhardt Incorporated to create his own team legacy in Michael Waltrip Racing, taking on the number 55. However, just like Robbie Gordon in the year prior, his venture over into owner-driver was nothing short of a disaster, posting an average finish north of 30th, while failing to qualify in 4 events throughout his campaign. In terms of viewership and pure cultural relevance, 2006 was NASCAR's peak, and it wasn't even close. The Daytona 500 would crack just below 20 million viewers, seeing 19.5 tune into Jimmie Johnson winning his first Daytona 500 to continue his incredible start to his career, while Hollywood would pump out not one, but two banger movies that were NASCAR related during the summer. First being Pixar's Cars on June 9, 2006, earning $462 million at the box office and still having massive cultural relevance today, being followed up just 2 months later by Will Ferrell's Talladega Nights, which released on August 4th and earned $163 million at the box office, again a film that is still loved to this day. Kasey Kahne finally broke out in 2006 after showing his potential for the past few years, proving his incredible speed after bursting onto the scene in 2004 wasn't a fluke, winning 6 times throughout the year, all coming at tracks that were either a 1.5 mile or a 2-mile track. While Denny Hamlin would stand out immediately at Joe Gibbs Racing, with one of the best rookie seasons in NASCAR history, going out and immediately asserting himself by winning the Budweiser Shootout over teammate Tony Stewart, and backing that up with 2 more wins, as well as a 3rd place points finish at the conclusion of the season. However, J.J. Yeley, his other rookie teammate at Joe Gibbs Racing, did not see the same success in an attempt to bring the 18 back to glory, earning just 3 top 10s, or 1 more top 10 than Denny Hamlin had wins across the season, while finishing all the way back in 29th in the final standings. Joining the 18 team in the struggling category for 2006 was Penske, as after putting both cars into the chase field in 2005, the 12 of Ryan Newman and the newly hired 2 driver of Kurt Busch struggled with Dodge's new car, going as far as running a body more similar to the 2004 version compared to its 06 counterpart in some races, just to find a little more speed. Yet the most notable decline this season would be that of former top team Robert Yates Racing, seeing Dale Jarrett post 1 top 5 and finish 23rd in the standings during his age 49 season, while Elliott Sadler collapsed in the second half after a decent start to the season, eventually going on to depart from Robert Yates midway through 2006 after 4 seasons and multiple wins for the team, leaving for the struggling Evernham 19 Dodge, who is sitting 34th in the standings compared to teammate Kasey Kahne, who had multiple wins. This created a weird situation with that year's NASCAR game cover, as EA had already printed out hundreds of thousands of copies of the game featuring Sadler in the 38 cover, before he swapped to the 19 card 3 weeks prior to the release. 2005 champion Tony Stewart experienced a collapse much like Jeff Gordon in the prior year throughout the summer, as after leaving the 11th race of the year at Darlington second in the standings, over 300 points ahead of 11th on the cut line, he'd have just 2 finishes ahead of 25th in the next 8 weeks to put him outside of the chase. Yet 4 straight top 10s vaulted him back into the top 5 in points with 3 races remaining, a buffer he'd quickly lose with finishes of 22nd and 9th over the next 2 weeks, leaving him just 45 points ahead of Kasey Kahne. Yet he'd have a disappointing run at Richmond all night when he needed to be at his best, while the other chase drivers ran up front, leaving him on the outside looking in at the end of the race, making him the first champion to miss the chase the following year. The chase grid consisted of Matt Kenseth, Jimmie Johnson, Kevin Harvick, Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, Dale Jr., Mark Martin, Jeff Gordon, and Kasey Kahne for 2006, and the 2 best drivers throughout the entire season in Matt Kenseth and Jimmie Johnson, who had both combined to lead the points for every race of the regular season, kicked off the chase with not so appealing starts. Seeing Kenseth fare decently, posting finishes of 10th, 23rd, 4th, and 14th to put him second in the standings halfway through, while Johnson immediately wrecked out of the first race hard on lap 90 at New Hampshire, backing it up with a 13th place a lap down at one of his best tracks in Dover and a 14th at Kansas, before nearly winning the next weekend at Talladega after leading on the white flag, yet being involved in a wreck with Dale Jr. down the backstretch that his teammate Brian Vickers started, leaving Johnson 24th in the race and over 150 points out of the championship lead. A second place the next week at Charlotte helped him chip away at the gap, but during the race championship contender Mark Martin's final bid at a title would suffer a devastating end, because after entering the night 10 points out of the championship lead, it would all be a race during a cycle of green flag pit stops midway through the event, when rookie J.J. Yeley slowed down in the middle of the track and turned hard left into Martin attempting to enter pit road, sending the 6 head-on into the outside wall and costing him well over 100 points. The man who picked up the slack of Kenseth and Johnson to lead the majority of the first half of the chase would be Jeff Burton, posting just 1 finish outside of the top 10 with a 27th at Talladega, Yet an engine failure during the 6th race at Martinsville just before halfway left him 42nd in the event, and dropped him from 1st to 5th in the standings, a deficit he could not overcome. Jimmie Johnson brought home his first win of the chase at Martinsville, while Matt Kenseth would steal the lead with just 4 races remaining on the year, holding slight gaps over the top 5 in the standings, with any of them looking to strike for the championship, and out of them, it was the Hendrick 48 that did. Going on a torrid stretch over the final 4 weeks, that included 3 straight second place finishes, backed by a 9th at Homestead which no one else can match, making Jimmie Johnson the 2006 NASCAR champion, something that fans would have to get used to seeing for years to come.
1 lap to go.
Front 4, single foul.
Here they go. They got to go. They got to get Mark moving. They got to move him somehow.
Gets back to that yellow line right around the bottom, all the way through turn 1 and 2.
Mark Martin is driving the race of his life, and there's nobody that's better at holding people off at Daytona.
And Kyle Busch lagged back a little bit. Is he going to get help? Is he going to come? He's looking. He almost squeezed Harvick into the wall, and here comes Harvick, the 29, with Matt Kenseth.
Oh, Mark got loose. Mark got loose.
And Harvick's getting a run off turn 4. It's going to be a drag race all the way back to the start-finish line. No caution. They're side by side, right to the line.
Big crash. Here they come. Checkered flag. Harvick. Kevin Harvick wins the Daytona 500.
We got one car
still,
on his roof coming across the start-finish line.
Still wrecking. They're wrecking everywhere.
This is what I consider the end of NASCAR's peak, so let's get started. Mark Martin's first venture into part-time racing led him to the 01 for Ginn Racing, narrowly losing out on winning the race that eluded him for over 20 years. Standing in victory lane, however, would be Kevin Harvick with his first Daytona 500, while his teammate Clint Bowyer was in the infield care center after sliding across the finish line upside down to end his race. An astonishing 61 cars entered to try and run in this year's Daytona 500, and in the midst of trying to make the biggest race in NASCAR, Michael Waltrip Racing was caught tampering with the fuel used in their 55 car, forcing NASCAR to hand down the biggest penalty in its history, including a $100,000 fine for Waltrip's crew chief David Hyder, as well as a 100 points penalty for Waltrip before the series even dropped the green flag on 2007, setting up for what was to be another disappointing season for the newly formed team. New to NASCAR was former F1 and IndyCar driver Juan Pablo Montoya, who after running part-time across ARCA, Busch, and Cup in 2006, was set to take over the reins of the 42 full-time in the Cup Series with Chip Ganassi Racing, managing to earn a win at Sonoma in his first ever road course attempt in Cup. A major moment came for the sport during this season, when NASCAR introduced its first new manufacturer to the series since Dodge returned back in 2001. Seeing Toyota jumping from the Truck Series to Cup fielding 2 teams, the previously mentioned Michael Waltrip Racing, as well as newly full-time team Red Bull Racing. Along with the new manufacturer, NASCAR also brought along an entirely new generation of car for the first time since the early 90s. NASCAR's Generation 5 car had its eyes set on safety over everything, featuring a wider cockpit for the driver, more foam all around the door, and more padding on the inside. However, at some point during testing they decided that they needed to add a wing to the car. I mean, they literally had it tested without the wing in 2006, and it actually looked really good, so I have no idea what the goal was. Average Brian France move, I guess. Anyways, the car debuted during the 5th race of the season at Bristol, being used on short tracks partly throughout 2007, before moving to being used during the entire schedule for 2008, yet the car was met with little to no applause from the fans or drivers.
I'm still not a very big fan of these things. I can't stand to drive them, they suck.
This victory was already the 3rd win of the season for Hendrick Motorsports in the first 5 races of 2007, continuing this dominance by winning 6 of the next 7 points races, with all 4 of their drivers making it into victory lane by June. Even Casey Mears, who albeit being 35th in the standings, managed to sneak in his only career win via fuel mileage at the Coca-Cola 600. Change was soon coming to the powerhouse organization though, as on June 13th, NASCAR's biggest star in Dale Jr. announced he was leaving his father's race team to race for Rick Hendrick, starting in the 2008 season. This marked the biggest move in NASCAR free agent history, and brought an end to one of the most iconic number and sponsorship duos in the history as well, that had been running since 2000. The move to Hendrick for Jr. forced Kyle Busch out of the team, making him a free agent, and later in the summer months of 2007, he'd announced he had signed with his next team for 2008, taking his talents over to the next biggest Chevy powerhouse in NASCAR, Joe Gibbs Racing. However, just 1 month after Busch's signing, they announced to the world they would become the flagship Toyota NASCAR team for 2008 and leave Chevrolet, giving them a chance to stand out on their own with the manufacturer. SMI during the summer announced a small little project to one of their tracks, deciding to add progressive banking and changing Bristol's layout to allow for multi-group racing. Daytona's 4th of July race in the summer produced one of the closest finishes in history, just months after the incredible 500 finish that was still fresh on the sport's mind, with Jamie McMurray earning his first Cup win since his improbable run at Charlotte, subbing for the injured Sterling Marlin all the way back in 2002. Unfortunately for the sport though, Ricky Rudd would close the book on his NASCAR career at the conclusion of 2007, which spanned all the way back into the 1970s, as after a hard crash into the outside wall in California, which left him briefly unconscious after the crash and with a separated shoulder, he'd be forced to miss the next 5 races, his first Cup Series races missed in well over 25 years. Chevrolet dominated this season, in both the Gen 4 and Car of Tomorrow, winning 27 of the 36 races run, or 75% of the schedule, matching that by putting 9 of their cars into the chase, also at 75%. But the championship ended up coming down to the most dominant cars all season, being last year's champion Jimmie Johnson and his teammate Jeff Gordon, who was in the middle of his best season since his dominant stretch of racing way back in the late 90s, with Gordon posting an average finish just above 8th throughout the entire regular season, his best since 1998, while also pulling into victory lane on 4 separate occasions. The mix of consistency and speed allowed the 24 team to lead the standings from the 5th race at Bristol all the way until the chase started, and once it began he'd continue to thrive, winning 2 of the first 5 races to put him 68 points ahead of Jimmie Johnson. However, the 48 team in response put together one of the most clutch and dominant stretches in NASCAR history to close out the chase, going on to win each of the next 4 races in a row at Martinsville, Atlanta, Texas, and Phoenix, and closing out the season with a 7th place finish at Homestead, to crown him the 2007 championship by still only 77 points over Jeff Gordon, who was completely overshadowed by this stretch, making one of the most consistent seasons in NASCAR history all for naught. Gordon finished outside of the top 20 just 3 times in 36 races, and his worst finish in the chase was an 11th place, but yet it still wasn't enough to take down Jimmie Johnson. And that'll do it for this video. Like and subscribe if you enjoy, and if you want to see more of my videos, click on the screen. See you guys for the next one.
Time is, can he hang on? It'll be close. Newman or Johnson, checkered flag. I did it, Newman. The last driver to run. New track record, Ryan Newman does it.
99, he won. Great job.
And he made it into the 47 seconds.
Guys, thank you so much.